We're going to start with Terry Wood, and I'm going to ask each legislator to introduce themselves and to talk about which committee on which committees, since many of you serve on 5, which committees you're involved in, and then I'll start the questioning right after that. In the meantime, there are index cards. Please write your questions, even though I know what you're going to ask. I want to hear the wording that you use. Okay, let's start with Terry Wood.
Thank you, On. Good. We're all on this morning. Thank you all for being here very much. It's good to have a dialogue and good to have participation. Critical session this year. Thank you, Harry, and thank you, Chamber. I'm Terry Wood. I represent Norwalk, Darien, 141st District. I'm on Finance, Revenue, and Bonding. I'm also on the Bonding Subcommittee. I'm on Human Services and Higher Education with Will, which has been a great experience this year. I'm also Policy Chairman for the Republican House Caucus.
Good morning. I'm Jonathan Steinberg, State Representative from the 136th District, which is the town of Westport. I can't think of any better way to start my day than to eat my breakfast in front of 100 people. Yeah, right. I am the House
I've seen
Chair.
Jonathan at the gym at 7 a.m., so I'll take this over that.
I am the House Chair of the Public Health Committee, and I also serve on the Transportation and the Energy and Technology Committees. They'll do.
Good morning. Thank you, Harry. I'm Gail Lavielle. I represent Wilton, Norwalk, and Westport in the House. And I'm ranking member of the Appropriations Committee, and I also serve on the Education and Transportation Committees.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much to the Chamber for having me here. My name is Will Haskell. I have the honor of representing the 26th District, which does not include Norwalk, but 7 other nearby towns. I was just recently elected this past November. I serve as the chairman of the Higher Education and Employment Advancement Committee, the vice chair of the Government Administration and Elections Committee, and I also serve on the Judiciary, Transportation, and Environment Committees. Looking forward to the conversation.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everybody over there. My name is Bob Duff, Senate Majority Leader. I serve as chair of the Executive and Legislative Nominations Committee, which is a committee where the governor's appointments come through. We approve those, and then it goes to the floor of the House and Senate, and I'm also the vice chair of the Legislative Management Committee.
Hello, thank you to the Chamber for hosting today and inviting all of us. It's going to be a great discussion. My name is Lucy Dathan. I represent the 142nd District, which covers part of Norwalk and part of New Canaan.
Hi, good morning. I'm Chris Perrone, State Representative from the 137th here, district here in East Norwalk and Norwalk. I sit on the Energy and Technology Committee. I also sit on the Transportation Committee, as well as I sit on also Finance and Approps, and within those committees, I chair the subcommittee on appropriations on transportation funding, and on finance, the subcommittee on transportation bonding. So guess what I like to talk about? Anyway, thank you.
Good morning. My name is Tom O'Day, State Representative of the 125th District, which is New Canaan and Wilton. I live in New Canaan. I'm a deputy leader, and I'm of the Republican Party. I'm on the committees of Transportation, Judiciary, and Environment. And please don't lean too far to the left, because you're going to knock me off the stage.
It's pretty early for a metaphor like that.
It's just another day in the chamber.
So I'd like to acknowledge, and I failed to acknowledge, former Norwalk Mayor Alex Knopp, who's here. Well, thank you, and all the good work he's doing for our library. I'd also like to point out, this is really one of the first times that the Chamber, in addition to our new logo, we are living up to the first word in our name, which is greater. So for Tom and Lucy and Will to be here is terrific, to have a more regional approach. There's probably nothing more regional than transportation. So we're going to go right in. Yesterday, the governor announced some proposed toll prices. So let's start with Chris Perrone to talk about...
I think I'm double parked.
Okay. Chris, give us the current status of tolls.
Yeah, the current status of tolls is something that's actually hard to define because we are in the process of moving this conversation through the legislature. Asking the DOT to move forward and put together a scheme and a plan for tolls and how they would work made it out of the Transportation Committee, but it's part of a larger conversation about how our state is going to fund its infrastructure going forward. I think that it's tolls have historically been this football that has been kicked around by either side, but I think that this is the first year where we started to see concrete plans moved forward, or an attempt to move these plans forward. So I think that the status of tolls is that this conversation is going to actually get more heated. I think we're going to see more details in the coming weeks. I mean, we have what the governor said yesterday, but we are the fact of the matter is, our special transportation fund becomes insolvent in a couple of years if we don't do something about this. And the only way we're going to maintain our roads in the state, not only in a state of good repair, but also be able to plan for the future, do things like transit-oriented development, build out our infrastructure in ways that make our state attractive to business, make our state competitive in the United States, is to really focus on our transportation infrastructure in a way that makes us more competitive. But also, we cannot. But we also have to make it self-sufficient in a way that does not pull money out of the general fund. I mean, at the end of the day, we can't take our kids to schools on basically can't drive on crumbling roads to get to crumbling schools, because that's what's going to happen. We're going to have to keep moving money out of the general fund to pay for the transportation if we don't get this right. So it's a critical issue.
So moving to the left, we'll go with Tom O'Day to hear from the Republican point of view on tolls.
So look, sitting on transportation, we spent a full day debating the tolls. 3 bills came out. It's the Republican position that, and if you listen to Keith Fana from the Connecticut Mirror, he spoke at the Wilton Library the other night, about $1.3 billion over the last 10 to 12 years was diverted. Whether it was taken or diverted, I'll leave it to you to take a look. But we believe the bipartisan budget that we put in place 2 years ago fully funded the transportation fund, and Governor Lamont's first crack at the budget takes $300 million and diverts it out of the transportation. It was going to go in, this car sales tax was going to go into the transportation fund, and he's putting it into the general fund. And so we think that's a bad idea. We think if you stick with the bipartisan budget, the state transportation fund will stay solvent. And if you look at our priority progress position, we think that we'll be able to fully fund transportation. Obviously open for debate, and I'm looking forward to talking it further with everybody up in the legislature. Thank you.
Okay, Jonathan Steinberg for the rebuttal.
Yay. Well, we've been so civil to this point, it's time to bring a little controversy into the mix. We all agree that we have a real problem. The most efficient bridge in the entire state is right here in Norwalk, the Yankee Doodle Bridge. Do you want to be holding your breath every time you cross it, or do you want to be doing something about it? Now, the only diversions that are going on here are the misdirections that I'm hearing from the Republicans on this subject. We must do something now. This is not about the Special Transportation Fund, because frankly, if it was solvent, it wouldn't have enough money in it to meet the needs. If you talk to the DOT commissioner, he has a sheaf of papers, each line of which is a postponed state of good repair project in the state of Connecticut, some of which date back decades. We've been talking about this problem for year after year after year, and I'm tired of what-if scenarios that are not going to happen, or scare tactics. The only scary thing for me is that our roads are deficient and on the brink of some sort of bad outcome. And I would say that anybody in the business community ought to be as eager as we are to address this transportation problem, because it's an economic imperative. If you can't move your goods or people on a reliable basis, if you're not interested in reducing congestion, if you're not interested in making sure our roads are safe, then you are not part of the solution here in the state of Connecticut, and particularly in Fairfield County.
Okay. Terry Wood.
Thank you. Well, I'm right in between both of them. I support tolls in concept. It makes all sense. Every state does have them. We had them until 1983, and I'm sure there are people in here who remember why they were taken out. So the issues of why they were taken out in 1983, the fatal collision in the Stratford tolls, doesn't exist because they will have tolling gantries. My deeper concern is that we are still not, this doesn't fiscally stabilize our state economic picture. And there's only two things that we need to do that is going to do that, and they are the elephant. They're not the elephant in the room. They are the biggest issue in the room. And one is our underfunded pension liability, and what are we going to do about addressing that, making that structurally efficient. And two, the allegiance of the Democratic Party to the state unions, the public unions. We've had 2 votes in the past 6 weeks that again extended benefits for judicial referee.
So let's stay on transportation.
Okay.
All
right.
We've
So
got a lot of red meat ahead of us.
I know, you're right, but that's why
Is that
I'm
Whole
in
30 or keto? I know.
Oh no, well no, that's just, I'm not even, that's a 0. That's a non-starter. But I support tolls in concept. I want to see efforts to stabilize our finances first and not put one more fee on state residents and businesses. Thank you.
Okay, Will for the last word.
Thank you so much, Harry. And I really appreciate Representative Wood's comments that she's open to the concept of tolling. I do think, especially given the many mistakes that Connecticut has made in generations past, especially with regard to our pension liabilities, too often the politically expedient thing to do, and the thing that legislators have done for decades, is fail to make an upfront investment and then ask future taxpayers, future voters, future Connecticut citizens to pick up the tab. There's bipartisan agreement on this panel, I think, that we need to update our infrastructure. The train from Norwalk to Grand Central is slower today than it was in 1950. We have 308 structurally deficient bridges. And it seems to me the disagreement is, should we amp up to a large degree our bonding, which is essentially a debt on all of us, paid exclusively by Connecticut citizens, but maybe not the Connecticut citizens of today, more likely your kids and your grandkids when the interest is due with those bonds? Or do we ask the out-of-state drivers and the trucking companies and the Connecticut drivers to contribute, raising $800 million, 40% of which would come from out-of-state drivers? Do we take advantage of the high-tech technology, which would allow us to give a 30% discount to those with a Connecticut Easy Pass and an additional 20% discount to frequent flyers, commuters, those who travel under a gantry more than 20 times a month? I view it as an issue of generational justice, a juncture at which we could either continue down the same path for Connecticut of taking out debt and charging the next generation, or make the fiscally responsible but perhaps politically difficult decision to charge our current drivers a user fee for the roads on which they have a wear and tear every single day.
Okay, moving along, because I know that just eliminated 15 index cards that said tolls. So the question of, we'll get to state pensions soon enough, but I want to pivot to Senator Duff, who talked about executive and legislative management and nominations. We talked about, those of you who were at the Chamber's dinner last week, at which the governor spoke, as well as his new commissioner, David Lehman. That was a somewhat controversial nomination, but nonetheless, it has been passed. Senator Duff, can you talk about the governor's vision, as well as Mr. Lehman's vision, on whether that's incentives to lure businesses here, and particularly for this audience, we read today GE Capital is vacating on Route 7, Diageo's moving to Stamford in New York. Talk about the state's plans for economic development.
Can I stand over here? Sure. Okay, I feel like I'm ignoring over here. Good morning again, everybody. So David Lehman, who is from Old Greenwich, came to speak the other day, and it was a nomination that was controversial in the state. And I think that some of that was because of the fact of, he worked for Goldman Sachs. He's not a name that people know up in Hartford. He's not one of the kind of the players that people are used to seeing up there. His story was the fact that he called the governor right after his inaugural speech and said, I really like what you had to say, and I want to be part of the conversation on how we can get Connecticut moving again. So he's somebody who none of us knew, came up, and then there was a little bit of controversy around that. But part of having a new administration, whether it's Republican or Democrat, is allowing the governor to, any governor, to put their team together. But that doesn't take away the oversight that the legislature has to do and properly do. So I will say this, is that I think the governor understands that there are a number of issues that we have been working on and we need to continue to work on to grow our tax base, because it's really about growing our tax bases, which is going to help move our state forward. Some of that is our workforce pipeline and ensuring that we have kids who are prepared for the jobs of the 21st century, prepared, and something that Senator Haskell and his committee has been working on very hard over the last few years, and working on that. Transportation, as we talked about tolling and how we move our transportation system forward, affordable housing, and also education. We can't have kids who are expected to have these high-tech jobs if they're not graduating, especially in our urban areas. We can no longer afford to have 40% of our kids who are graduating passing the test, and 60% in our urban areas who are not passing the proper tests or prepared for community colleges. So what I think about David Lehman is that he brings a new sense of a new perspective and a different set of connections that previously had not been there. And it's not to take away from any of the previous commissioners, but he has a different level of kind of a Rolodex, for lack of a better term, that had not been there in the past. So for me anyway, I think it's important for us to give him a chance to let himself articulate his vision that he has and implement the governor's vision as well. And from what I understand, he was in front of the legislature's finance committee last week and some of the subcommittees and did very well. And it takes a lot to learn the job. It's not something that you just walk into and you get a briefing paper and all of a sudden you know everything. When you're the head of the Department of Economic and Community Development, that has a lot of pieces to it. And having somebody who is a private sector business person and coming into state government, you have to kind of bring all those together and bring your skill set with the skill set that's already there. So let's give him a chance.
Does anyone else on the panel want to talk to Gail? Sure, we haven't heard from Gail this morning. No.
My more competent high-tech colleague. Thank you, Harry. I would say one thing. I've also met with Commissioner Lehman and like him very much, and he has good experience. I'm not troubled by him per se, but what I am troubled by is seeing so far, at least from the budget point of view, a lot of focus on attracting tourism, which is great. But very little in the way of plans or aspirations for attracting new businesses to Connecticut. We do need to pay very close attention to the businesses that are here because they are already sort of our capital in hand, if you will. But if we don't have a story to tell about Connecticut, and we should, and there's plenty to work with. I'm not saying there isn't, of course there is. But we have to have a story to tell. I know we have people at CERC that Governor Lamont has also appointed. We have Indra Nooyi, we have Jim Smith. There will be others whose job is supposed to be to think about this. But I think it is urgent to identify a solid economic development policy for attracting new businesses, because if we don't actively expand our tax base, I don't know what we'll do. It's an absolute imperative. So I would like to hear more on the story that's going to be told about Connecticut to make this happen.
Okay. We'll pivot a little bit, but we've heard the governor talk about the, Terry?
I just wanted to mention briefly that I am a fan of Ned Lamont's. I think he is a bright spot in our government right now. He brings, boy, it got quiet in here. He listens. He's willing to build consensus. He's reached out to Republicans. He genuinely wants to hear what people are thinking. His wife, many of you probably know this, is a very successful venture capitalist. She gets math. He's surrounded himself with very good people. I think Commissioner Lehman is very good. As I mentioned, I'm on the bonding subcommittee and met with him on Tuesday on what he's proposing. And he's getting up to speed. It does take time, but he's getting up to speed, and he understands fundamentals of how to finance incentives, and that's what we need. And to Gail's point, we do need to expand our tax base, and we have to attract businesses. So the other thing Governor Lamont has put together, as Gail referenced, is he's reissued CERC, Connecticut Economic Resource Council, and the two chairs of that are Jim Smith, a recently retired CEO of Webster Bank. He's now chairman of Webster Bank, his family's bank, multi-generational family, and Indra Nooyi, the retired CEO of Pepsi. So, I mean, that's a dynamo team, and they're excited, they're enthusiastic. They can pick up the phone and call anyone. And Indra Nooyi just was put on the Amazon board, so she has been tasked with finding Jeff Bezos a girlfriend in Connecticut.
Wow. Okay. No one will ever say, this is the most interesting legislative breakfast I've ever seen. Okay, we're going to turn to Representative Lucy Dathan to bring us down to earth and ground us. Lucy sits on the Appropriations Committee, and one of the governor's favorite expressions so far has been debt diet. So we'll look to the Appropriations Committee, and if you could explain the difference between approps and finance and where the committee is headed at this point.
Thank you very much. Trying to get everybody back down to earth. So looking at how our state government works, we have all the money that comes in is working with the revenue and bonding side, all the taxes, any sort of loans that we would get as a state would all be coming in through that side, and then the appropriation is everything that's going out the door. So all of our funding of our transportation as well as our schools and human services and other things. So I'm sitting on appropriations. I'm actually on 3 subcommittees, conservation and development, and I echo what Bob said about Commissioner Lehman. I was extremely impressed, and I do feel he is looking at how we are going to be more successful in bringing in businesses for our state. I'm also on the transportation subcommittee within appropriations, and then finally on legislative. I really am happy to see that the governor is embracing this debt diet. Looking at both our general fund and our special transportation fund, our general fund, 12% of our operating expenses is going towards debt servicing. I'm a 25-year finance executive. I've been CFO of various technology companies for 15 years. That's a concerning percentage for me. The more concerning percentage is the 40% of interest and debt servicing that we have in our special transportation fund. So I fail to see, as a finance person, how we are going to get that special transportation fund to be solvent and do what needs to get done in order to fix our 242 bridges and upgrade our road infrastructure and as well as our rails without a revenue stream coming into that fund. I think the debt diet who's holding the line, it is hard for many municipalities and other agencies that are looking at wanting to fund and bond certain activities, but we need to make sure that we get our fiscal house in order. Just like we sit around our kitchen tables and we decide, hey, you know, we can't afford to do this, we can't borrow against, you know, what we have, our future earnings, just so that we can do what we'd like to do. We have to be reasonable, and we need to be thinking like, you know, living within our means. And I think the governor's debt diet is one way of us doing that.
Okay. I'm going to switch to Gail, who's also on Appropriations Committee. Do you want to?
Harry, what was your original question?
My original question was debt diet.
It was the debt diet?
Yes.
Okay, well, just to make one thing sort of clear is that as Lucy referred to, the Finance, Revenue, and Bonding Committee, that is where the bonding decisions are made. Are we going to raise or lower bonding? What we do deal with on the Appropriations Committee is the debt service for the bonding. And I think we have to laugh because on the first day that we had a budget presentation by the governor's budget director, I told everybody in my caucus, please do not talk about debt because they will make you stop. And all of us somehow systematically talked about debt, and a whole bunch of us got stopped, including me, because it's very difficult to differentiate at a certain point. I think one of the things, and this is actually what I addressed on that very first day, was the question of transportation debt and where we are today concerning the Special Transportation Fund and whether we should be bonding or not bonding and so on. But my question was, are you going to have enough? You know, they tell us it's going to take 5, 6, 7 years to do tolls. So let's say everybody supported tolls, even if they did. It would be a while. And there's also an upfront investment to actually install them and do the design, all that kind of thing. And it strikes me as an odd move to stop the planned transfer of the tax on the sales tax on new cars, which would be phased into about $380 million a year, to stop the scheduled transfer of that money from the general fund into the Special Transportation Fund. So while saying there's not enough money to do anything without tolls, the governor has also proposed to take that money away from the Special Transportation Fund. I don't get it. It's breaking the bank while you're simultaneously trying to spend money. So that's a question that still remains unresolved. That remains part of the proposal. I have not yet seen it questioned in any budget documents in appropriations, although it wouldn't be because it's a finance item. I don't know what the Finance Committee will do with it. We'll know that soon enough, I guess. There are another thing I would address on the appropriations level, and then I'll leave that so we can get to another question. As you all may know, there was a contract signed with state employees in 2017 that would extend all benefits for state employees agreed on at that point for 10 years. And it would also fix wages and working conditions until 2021. And there was a no layoff clause. The reason was because I've now found out, by delving into this since we're in charge of that in our appropriations and I'm ranking member, I've discovered there's a no layoff clause because there always is. No one actually discussed, how can we really do this? Here's a protocol, we have no layoffs, and then we'll give you something back. So that's what was done because it has always been done since the early 1980s. And we have, in the last several weeks, Terry referred to them, had come before us 4 contracts for groups of people who work for the state government who have newly decided to belong to that, to take part in that CVAC contract, to join a union with the state. We've got about 6 more contracts coming to us before the session is over with because there was arbitration or because it took these people a while to decide they wanted to be in the union. So we're doing their wage part of the CVAC agreement now. And all of them are receiving, for the 2 years coming up in the biennium, they'll be getting approximately an 11% raise over that time. They will be getting a $2,000 one-off payment, and they will also, in certain cases, as in the Assistant Attorneys General, be getting a the managers will be getting a $6,000 bonus the first year and a $12,000 bonus the second year. It's very hard to imagine anybody in the private sector getting guarantees like this. I don't know anyone in the private sector who does, and I never did in my 26 years in the private sector. What we have here, though, everyone says state employees are all taxpayers too, Gail. Of course they are. I'm not dumb, I know that. But they are 2% of the taxpayers. And I think it would be great if all 100% of the taxpayers got the same benefits. We know we can't afford that, but here's what's happening. The other 98% are paying for their benefits. And to me, that's the biggest question of fairness we have before us in the Connecticut General Assembly. And it is not fair.
Okay,
Thank you.
from the Democratic side, Senator Duff.
Thanks. So let me just add a little bit more flavor on this whole issue. So our people ask us all the time, especially as we debate tolls or other types of things about our state government and the size of our state government. We have done a bunch of things with state government over the last so many years. Some of that is to have we're down about 13% of our workforce. So state government is actually 13% smaller than it was about 8 or 9 years ago. We have actuarially paid into our pensions for the first time over the last 8-9 years. And we have the smallest workforce per capita since the late 1960s. So state government has shrunk, and it has reduced our costs. Now those two contracts that were voted on in 2012 and 2017 each saved about $20 billion each over 20 years. So we have now Tier 3 and Tier 4 state employees. So that's saving a tremendous amount of money. The last tier, Tier 4, was very, very important because we expect probably about 40% of our state employees to retire over the next 10 years or so. And those new employees are now on a 401k/pension plan with higher costs for health care for themselves and more payments into the pension as well. So those things are important that we've done. Now, as to regard to the contract for the Assistant Attorneys General, the reason why they all decided to unionize is because they hadn't had a raise in 20 years. And so while, yes, if you speak about their raises over the next 2 or 3 or 4 years, it does seem high, but consider the fact that they haven't had a raise in 20 years. And the fact of the matter is that those assistant attorneys general bring in hundreds of millions of dollars per year to the state through lawsuits that they settle from around the country. So they're well worth it, and they work very hard. So there's a number of ways in which we can spin this, and would it have been better for the legislature probably to provide raises or cost of living increases over the last 20 years? Of course it would have been. We didn't do it. So they unionized. And now we had to finally pay them and give them a raise and a cost of living increase that they hadn't had in 20 years.
Okay, we're going to change the format very briefly for what I call the lightning round. Terry Wood, you're going to be first. It's going to come down the table.
First again.
No Jeff Bezos questions. The answer is yes or no. One-word answers, guy. This is where you put politicians' feet to the fire. Now, we've talked about some of these topics. Others we will get to, but this is your response. Are you in favor of tolls? Terry.
Yes.
Jonathan.
But not now.
Jonathan.
Yes.
Not right this minute.
Yes.
Depends.
Yes.
You have to ask? Yes.
No.
Thank you, Tom. Okay, legalize marijuana. Terry.
No.
No.
It does depend.
Yes.
I'm on the fence.
No.
No.
I don't want that. Terry, legalize sports betting.
No. Yes.
Okay. Does she think all I do is feed trick questions? Let's start over. Okay, Terry, legalize sports betting.
Is that the one?
FanDuel, come on, it's easy. You don't go to your bookie anymore. You just give it to the state. Jeez. All the money I lost on the Final Four, come on.
Yes. My husband said yes.
Oh, jeez. Wow. Jonathan,
Yes, but not casinos.
separate question. Just legalize sports betting.
Yeah, same thing. Yes, but not casinos.
Yes.
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 Wow, Tom O'Day said yes to something. Okay. He's never invited again. Okay. Back to you, Terry. Will we have a state budget on time when the legislature adjourns? Jonathan.
I'm usually hopeful, but I'm going to say yes.
I cannot tell. I don't know.
Yes, I'd like to.
Right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Not a chance.
Okay. Okay.
I'm making it too easy.
Okay. Maybe we'll start with O'Day on this one. What's called FMLA, Family Medical Leave Act. Tom.
Not on a taxpayer's dime, privately subsidized through tax breaks, yes. So no to mandatory, yes.
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 Will.
Absolutely.
Yes, but not with the bill that's currently before the.
Right, and we're going to get to that bill next.
I would agree, not as currently written in the legislature.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Will we, or I guess let's mix up. Should we repeal the estate tax? Terry.
Yes. Emphatically, yes.
Jonathan.
Yes.
Yesterday.
Yes.
I'm on the fence.
Yes.
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 Wow. Okay. Last one. Last one. A casino in Bridgeport. Terry.
No, 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 no.
Okay.
No.
Okay. Jonathan. Okay.
No, thank you.
Okay.
I'm on the fence.
Well,
Never been a fan.
I'm on the fence.
No.
No.
interesting. Okay. I asked one of the questions on Family Medical Leave Act. No questions from the audience. Oh, you couldn't hear him?
Never been a fan.
Never been a fan, I think was his first response. Yeah, thank you. Okay. Two things. Let's go, Will, let's go to you. You're the chairman of the Higher Education Committee. We have a community college here. Two topics. Debt-free college, which we hear a lot about, and more importantly, regionalization
Sure.
of community colleges. We're not going down that rabbit hole of regionalized schools.
I was a little worried there for a second. So we don't just have a community college in Norwalk. We have what I believe to be the best community college here in Norwalk. And
For a new kid, he knows how to pander to the audience. Jesus,
No.
just answer the question.
So we are doing a lot to address the high cost of higher education in Connecticut. We proposed a pretty modest debt-free college bill in the committee that I chair. A few weeks ago, so many students for hours came and testified. One community college student skipped his anatomy lecture to tell us that he was already $20,000 or $30,000 in debt. He was 20 years old. Connecticut has the third highest student loan debt in the entire country. This holds people back when they try to start a small business, when they try to buy their first home, when they're deciding where to start their career. And unfortunately, too many of my peers are picking up and moving to other states. We don't see a tremendous amount of interest in Connecticut among 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds. To turn that around, I think we have to do a better job of making sure that everybody has an opportunity to access community college. The data shows that more than 90% of community college graduates stay in Connecticut. So what can we do to increase enrollment? I think the best thing is debt-free community college. We make sure that nobody graduates with a tremendous amount of debt. It's not free community college, but it does fill the tuition gap. So 60% of community college students have 97% or more of their tuition covered by federal aid. That means there's only around 40% of students who we need to fill the gap between whatever their federal, state, and institutional aid is and the full cost of tuition. The bill that we passed out of committee only applied to families that had an average household income of around $80,000. It turned out to be really, really cheap to do this, so we've decided to scale it up a little bit because what the Nonpartisan Office of Fiscal Analysis came back with us when they analyzed the bill, they told us that if we get rid of the income limit, if we tell every student in Connecticut who maintains a GPA of 2.5 or above and is a permanent resident of Connecticut that they can actually have 2 years of debt-free community college, It'll cost the state $10.7 million, but it will bring in $11.9 million into a community college system that desperately needs it. And most importantly, it will increase enrollment in the first 2 years by more than 4,000 students. So if you believe that the community college system is cash-strapped, as I do, and we have to give them money anyways, we could either give them $10.7 million in appropriations, or we could create a debt-free community college system costing $10.7 million, increase their revenue by $11.9 million, and most importantly, increase their number of students by more than 4,000. So I'm really excited about that.
I was going to say, your enthusiasm here. Would anyone like to comment on that proposal? Okay.
You didn't mention the regionalization.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, thank you, Susan.
Good catch. I got excited and distracted. So, Representative Wood and I have been asking tough questions in the Higher Ed Committee of Marco Jakian and the Board of Regents folks around Students First. We believe that it's moving perhaps too quickly, and we'd like to introduce greater legislative oversight. The process should be democratic. So we reported a few bills out of committee. They were bipartisan, and ultimately, there's one bill that says if a community college merges or closes, that has to be subject to approval by the legislature. There's another bill that says any communications between NECHI, the accrediting agency, and the Board of Regents surrounding the issue of consolidation or regionalization has to be subject to transparency, has to be disclosed to the Higher Ed Committee. So we are trying to introduce greater oversight there.
Terry, do you want to jump on that?
Thank you. Certainly Norwalk NCC, I don't have to say the word, is a gem. Our very proud son is a graduate of NCC 2016. It's a gem of a school. It serves so many needs, and the community college system is deeply valued. As Will said, this debt-free college bill certainly has a lot of merits to it. The regionalization, I have great concerns over this. It's speeding down the track. It's put together by a team that in 2011 was charged with consolidating the Board of Regents, which consolidated our state university system and our community colleges into one state system, CSCU. It was projected to save their projections was to save $23 million. It didn't save that. It ended up costing the state more money than it saved. So why are we putting the same team, Marco Jakian, in charge of this college consolidation plan? It makes no sense whatsoever. When they went to NEASC, it's now called NECHI, NECHI, New England College of Higher Education, Consortium of Higher Education, yeah, something. Keeping on track of the acronyms in Hartford is a career all on its own. NECHI last May said, this plan is half-baked. You've got to go back to the drawing board. So he's still speeding down the track, hiring regional vice presidents, and doesn't seem to care what anybody thinks about this. The Board of Regents is in my opinion, a very weak board. They don't exercise. A proper board asks lots of questions of the president. There's a balance between the board and the president, and there should be a balance. There's no balance there. So for a variety of reasons, there's deep concern. We do want oversight, and we need to protect the value and the autonomy throughout the state of our community college system. It is a gem in our state. Thank you.
This seems like a natural segue from college. Representative O'Day, the use of legalized cannabis in the state. The Judiciary Committee's had a number of bills this week which passed. There's a so-called tax that some people are proposing. It's used exclusively in cities. Can you talk to people about that as a possibility? The idea of the expungement of the low-level criminal charges in the so-called war on drugs, kind of give people an overview of that. And also, importantly, how businesses would be affected in terms of employment and things like that.
So I'm a lawyer politician. I've been biting my tongue so hard I'm bleeding in my mouth. So I'll try and do this really quick. It's basically the recreational marijuana bill that came before Judiciary also expunged possession charges. The question was how far back they could go. Judiciary says they can't go too far back because they don't have the ability to expunge everything from way back. I'm in favor of that. We've already decriminalized possession. It's a ticket, $150 for anything under an ounce, which I don't know how much it is, believe it or not. As far as every single one of the bills that's coming before, in my opinion, before us, you should ask a number of questions as I knock my name over. Is it going to be good or bad for business? Because Connecticut is the only state with a negative GDP in the entire country over the last 10 years, and almost negative 8%, 7.9. So we need small business to grow dramatically, or we're done. You can try and save any money anywhere you want. Unless we grow our small businesses, the state is done, and put up the tolls, do anything you want, we're done. So in order to grow small business, what do? I will submit to you, legalizing recreational marijuana will not help small business. We've got a bill that is full of holes on how we're actually going to do it. I'll give you one stat, or one story. A mother works with my wife. Her son went out to Boulder. They legalized it. He's a disaster. I will submit to you, if you look at the cost of legalizing recreational marijuana to the state of Colorado and the state of Oregon, it's a disaster. And the problem with Connecticut is it's even worse, because we have medical marijuana that we put in our statutes. You cannot discriminate against anyone who's using medical marijuana in the workplace. That sounds innocuous. That sounds like, okay, it's a nice thing to do. The problem is, you can't fire somebody if they test positive for marijuana. We don't have the technology to say, well, how high were they at midnight last night versus 8 o'clock when we tested them on the job before. Habitual use raises your THC content in your blood to a certain level that you don't know how high they were at a time when they're on the job. Legalizing recreational marijuana will be a disaster to Connecticut, not only from a social context, but also from a workplace context. I've got a cousin who's literally hitting me with hate mail every day because he wants me to legalize it. I've got my teenagers who I know aren't using, but who say all their friends want us to legalize it. It's a bad idea. From head to toe, I'm fully opposed to it.
Okay, Jonathan Steinberg.
Full disclosure, back in college, I smoked, I inhaled.
I should have put that in the lightning round, right?
But
Right.
what we're talking about now is not the same. It's not your grandfather's marijuana. This is a genetically engineered plant. We've done wonders for the medical marijuana community. We have a wonderful program, a model for the rest of the country. But recreational is a totally different experience for the people in Connecticut. As chair of the Public Health Committee, I am concerned and alarmed that this bill has yet to be referred to the Public Health Committee for consideration. I've had conversations with the chairs of General Law and Judiciary. The experience in Colorado recently with edibles and overdosing and people ending up in the emergency room should be incredibly cautionary to us. There is plenty of science out there. What we have that indicates that it affects the adolescent brain actually up to age 25, which is why I'm particularly proud we'll be bringing out a bill shortly in the legislature to raise the tobacco and vaping age to 21 and to try to deal with that epidemic. Frankly, I wish we could bring that up to 25 as well, knowing what we know about the brain interactions. All I'm saying is recreational marijuana may be inevitable. All the states around us are going to do it, but we must do it the right way to protect people. And I'm not sure any legislation I've seen so far comes close enough that I could support it. We need to be incredibly rigorous on this if it takes us years.
Gail?
Thank you. I agree with my colleague Jonathan on the way this is being done. There was a press conference yesterday I was listening to, and the question came, why hasn't this come before public health? And the answer was, well, that's not the reason we're doing it. You know, this is a revenue thing. And I think it's irresponsible to do something like this just for revenue. You have to consider all the policy ramifications. And I have to say the one that bothers me the most, and I have done something about it, is that we have no way today of telling for sure whether someone who uses marijuana for medical reasons legitimately or someone who habitually uses it for whatever reason, we can't tell if we test them whether they're high now or whether they were high 30 days ago. The presence of marijuana in the bloodstream is 30 days, basically, if you're testing that way. And so we don't have any way to tell if somebody is high while they're driving. I mean, we have drug recognition experts who are very well trained, and they can tell a certain amount. They can't tell what drug it is. They can't tell whether you just took a Benadryl. And so we have, if we have a substance that's suddenly legal, but we can't give people a real gauge of how much of it they can have before they drive, before they operate heavy machinery, before they do anything that could possibly cause a danger to another person. That's a problem. Now, they don't have that anywhere else either, but they decided to go ahead with it. I did have a bill before the Public Safety Committee that the police chiefs testified in favor of, AAA testified in favor of. It has moved forward. It would oblige the state of Connecticut to immediately go into an examination of best practices around the country and what companies are getting ready to do pilot testing of products. But if we don't have something like that, I think we're seriously in trouble of endangering other people.
Lucy? Oh, sorry. Go.
Okay, I'll stop there.
Thank you. So as I said, I'm on the fence about it. And the main reasons I'm on the fence about it is I'm a mom of 3 teenagers, and I feel like when we legalize it, we're normalizing it. And I'm concerned of what message we're giving our young people, particularly the fact that science now knows that brains are not fully developed until about 25. So even if we legalize it up to 21, there's still that sort of 21 to 25 where you have a developing brain, and we don't know what the implications are in the long term. That's one thing. And then the second thing I'm looking at is the social cost. You know, for every dollar we bring in, how much is it going to cost us as a state for either education, to help make sure that it doesn't hurt people or lead to other addiction issues. So those are my 2 concerns. My real also concern is about teen vaping. As I said, I have 3 teenagers, and my kids tell me that, kids are at school vaping in the bathroom. I get concerned about the flavored vaping products. I put in a bill to ban flavored vaping products for our state, because I think this is a gateway. Again, it's normalizing vaping for kids to get in, and they have just as much nicotine, if not more, than the regular vaping products. And that those products are even more concentrated with nicotine than the cigarettes that people have been smoking traditionally. So I'm really anti-vaping, and I think we need to make sure I'm supporting bills that are making sure that those don't get up, are not legal till the age of 21, because I do think that these vaping products are a gateway to bigger things. And if you can delay any child from trying cigarettes, alcohol, marijuana, until they're adults, they have less of a chance of being addicts and having issues as they're adults. So that's it.
And I agree with everything that Lucy said. The issue is, and this is a very serious issue, which is why I think it's taking a long time on this panel, is because the questions are, do we control our own destiny here in the state of Connecticut, or since other states around us are legalizing recreational marijuana, do we have others go to those other states and buy it, and then we're not controlling our own destiny? So that's part of the debate. For me, anyway, there's 2 things. One is I would never vote for a bill that would allow people to grow it themselves, and that is part of some of the debate that's going on. And because of if you speak to the folks in Colorado who implemented the legislation or the vote that they had, you could learn a lot. And I have spoken to the folks there about the pluses and the minuses and the pitfalls and all those kinds of things. So
the highs and the lows.
The highs and the lows, right? But the other
Too easy.
The other piece of this, and again, nobody wants younger people smoking marijuana, though they are. That right now on the black market, you have marijuana that is laced with fentanyl and laced with illicit things to get people more addicted to it. So that has to be part of the conversation as well. I certainly agree with high while driving and that being a major issue. Not that that's not happening now. And again, how do we control our own destiny on some of these kinds of things? And that's at least part of the debate. I'm not sure if there are a lot of people who this is their number 1 issue, but this is an issue that people are thinking about, which is why I think it's you have a very thoughtful conversation happening up here about this particular topic.
Chris, last word, and then we got one question after this.
Okay. Just really briefly, I think that, how many people here are in business? Okay, right? Okay. So basically it's this. I think, yeah. So basically, my issue is when you've got something like this, that, if we're passing this as a revenue source for us going forward, when you consider the fact that all the other states around us are also passing it, you get market saturation. And I think eventually you have sort of a race to the bottom. You're going to have, states are going to try to outdo each other, I think, actually, to try to, tax less. And I think you're going to wind up with this, what we thought was for want of a better term, cash crop for the state of Connecticut, declining in value to the state of Connecticut. At the same time, because of the potency of the THC and other things, you're going to see, I think, the investments in social programs and addiction programs and that other thing and those kinds of things escalate. So, and nobody knows where those values are, but I think that we're actually in the long run, putting more at stake, investing in this, risking the future of our youths as well as the society at large, rather than investing in job training and renewable energies, other business channels that are actually going to grow and develop our economy. So it's about picking priorities and where we're going to invest.
So the final question will be teachers' pensions. Something light and easy, and it's 5 of 10, and so let's start with Gail Lavielle.
Thank you, Harry. First off, this question is not about do we owe them their pensions or their health care. They've been promised. Of course we do. You make a promise, you keep it. However, there's two proposals right now before all of us. One of them concerns making the towns pay for the current costs, not the legacy costs, but the current costs of the teachers' pensions, a portion of that. It starts out kind of low. Over the next 3 to 4 years, it gets bigger. In fact, tends to triple in size, at least, for most towns. Millions of dollars in some cases. Problem with this, it's being passed off as, hey, the towns can pay for this, so we're not raising your taxes. Of course it's raising your taxes, because where are the towns going to get the money? The only place they have to get the money is from your property taxes. So as they pay for this, then they have to raise your property taxes to make up the difference, to pay for local schools and local services. Okay, that provision was in a governor's bill. That was before the Education Committee. The provision was removed from the bill, so you will hear people say it's dead. Well, the governor's actually said it's not dead. Of course it's not dead. It will come back. And the one thing to remember about anything that anyone says about any bill that is dead right now, it can still come back in a budget implementer. So watch out till midnight on June 5th if we're done by then. That's the day. That's when the session
Senator
ends.
Duff,
okay?
and then
I have one more, Harry. I'm sorry. So that is something to think about. That provision is in there. The second proposal is to stretch out the payments to pay off the debt on the bonds that were issued during the Rell administration to make the teachers' pension fund whole, or at least decently funded. The proposal is to stretch out those obligations for 30 years. At present, it's 12, so I guess it's to add 18 years. Doing that this was already done with the state employee pension funds. That adds a cost. When you pay off a car that you bought for a longer period of time, it costs you more money, right? So this actually would be a cost of $17 billion extra to taxpayers to stretch this thing out to 30 years. I'm told that discounting it back to present value would make it around $2 billion today. But that's if you believe that money would be earning 6.9% for the next 30 years, which I don't. So those are just two things to keep in mind. I think that the pushing it down to towns is very onerous. And also the towns don't have a say, although they can set teacher salaries. Those are subject to last best offer binding arbitration, so it's very hard for the towns to control that. And they certainly don't have a say now in how those pension rates are set. And the second one, I think, is somewhat, I understand it, it's good thinking, but it's somewhat precarious and unduly optimistic. Thank you, Harry.
Oh, sure. Thank you. Senator Duff.
Thank you. I have 2 minutes. So here's the thing, 30 seconds. So here's the thing, is that with legislatures and governors for 50 years ignored this issue, which is why we have these huge cliffs for both state employees' pensions and for teachers' retirement pensions. The state employees was amortized to smooth out some of those cliffs because we could not afford to pay a $6 billion cost in 2032. And the same is for the teachers as well, which is why we have to amortize it to smooth out those payments. Otherwise, you keep hearing about deficits and deficits and deficits, even though we have shrunk our state government and we've shrunk our discretionary funding. There's a plan this year to take the teachers' retirement, and even though what we did in 2006 was to bond $2 billion, we lost all those gains in 2008. But there's a plan now to take the teachers' retirement, put a $300 million guarantee into another fund, and then we will then bring down some of that cliff as well. Those are the kinds of things that make structural reform. And then talking about having some of the towns pay for a portion of the teacher's retirement pension, I'm open to that idea because of the fact that we're one of a few states right now where the state pays the full boat of the teacher's retirement, and we're only talking about up to 25% above the average of the teachers' pay from the statewide average. So we're not asking towns and cities to pay 100% of it or even 50% of it. It's 25% above the average, which does help to bring down some of those costs. And you can't talk about structural reform in the state if every idea is a bad idea. You have to say yes to something in order to make sure that we are making the decisions in order to grow our economy long term. Again, our state government has shrunk. We have made pension payments that have 100% actuarial. We have done a lot of different things, and you've got to continue to make these structural reforms in order to be able to afford education, transportation, housing, nonprofits, all the other things that we agree to, but we've got to get our fiscal house in order that way as well.
Okay, we're going to wrap it up. We're going to start with Terry Wood. 30 seconds, closing comments. No need to thank the chamber or me.
Oh, then I'm done. Just thank you again for being here. It's critical. I've been watching faces as we've been making comments, and it's so important that we hear from you. We are a representative government. We represent you. I've been meeting with groups of people, small groups of people, because they've asked, and that's important. So if any of you want to meet and discuss something more in depth, happy to do that. And again, thank you for being here.
Fairfield County has been the economic engine of this state for a long time. If it's going to continue to be and we're going to diversify, we have to remind ourselves what made us a wonderful place to do business back in the 80s before a lot of these things happened. For us to be a vital state again, unfortunately means a lot of investment, and most of it has to do with infrastructure, transportation, energy, water, housing. If you want to create vibrant cities, if you want to have people come here and live here and prosper and grow their businesses, I'm telling you, the future of this state is about making adequate investment in those things that will make us continue to be the gateway to New England.
Thank you. And while I won't thank Harry for anything, thank you all for being here. And thank you, Harry. I do have just one comment. Yes, you do have to say yes to things. And listen, folks, being in the minority party for 40 years, you come up with a lot of proposals. And you say yes to all of them because you came up with them. 30 seconds is not time to list them. But sometimes you have to say yes to those proposals as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me here. It really has been an honor to speak with you today, and also to have this position, the opportunity to represent the 26th District in the Senate. I'll just say very briefly that I don't think that our democracy can be representative if it isn't participatory. And throughout the campaign, I went to 142 living rooms. I knocked on around 4,000 doors. Some of the best ideas that now I'm trying to pass into law came from constituents, and that shouldn't end just because the campaign is over. So if you have a great idea, whether you're in Norwalk or Westport or Wilton, wherever you live, please do send me an email, give me a call. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you.
I want to thank Brian and Ben. They're doing a great job. Not Harry. No. And Clay, you're the best chairman ever. You know, we talk a lot about some of the issues today, the challenges that the state faces, but let's leave the room knowing that Connecticut is a great state. People come here for our great quality of life, that we're in between New York and Boston. We have a great educational system, we have a great recreational system, and people come here because they love it here. And we can work through these challenges. We are smart people, we have the best workforce in the nation, the most productive workforce in the nation. So while we will continue to debate some of the challenges we have, let's not forget what a great state we are and how great Connecticut is and why people want to move here. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Clay. Thank you, Brian, for organizing. And thank you all for taking time out of your busy mornings to be here, because I know your businesses probably needed you this morning, but it means a lot that you want to have your voices heard. I left some brochures of mine out in the entryway, so please take one, get in contact with me. I would love to hear from you. I try to answer every single constituent email in a timely manner. It's tricky because I get several hundred every day. But please reach out, and I look forward to hearing your ideas and ways that we can make our state and continue to be a great state to live in. Thank you.
Thank you very much for everybody for being here for many of the same reasons that have been pointed out. You know, we can't do this job without understanding your opinions, your viewpoints on what matters to you as citizens. Frankly, infrastructure is the economic backbone of any state. I think that focusing on ours, developing a 30-year plan that everybody buys into, that that's sustainable, that's you know, where with a stable revenue stream, I think is one of the things that's going to get us where we want to be as a state competitively. But I think we also need to do more to integrate our colleges, our businesses, and government. That partnership, like they do in Research Triangle and other regions of the United States, where they see that as a work engine for their economic development as well. So those are areas I continue to stress and make sure that we're putting legislation in place to foster that. So again, thank you very much for coming in, and thank you for your input. So something I said?
So I don't fall over. So I want to thank you. I have 30 seconds. It's really great to hear from. Thank you, Bob. Getting hit from the left. But the Greater Norwalk Chamber, thank you so much. I need you to do me a favor. I'm going to ignore the fact that you've got Peter Nolan, Mark Grenier, and Harry Carey on your board, who are all friends of mine. But I do want you to reach out to your state reps. The number one thing we need to address is small business in the state of Connecticut. Without small business growing, we're doomed. The last thing I'll say is on the pot. The reason that I changed my mind, my thought has evolved, okay? My 20s and 30s, I was more libertarian, not because of use, but because of my political position. Now, with teenagers, I thought in Colorado, if you regulate it, you'd be controlling it. The problem is the black market grew, access grew, the pot got worse. Okay, legalizing creates more problems, and I'll leave it with that. Keep in touch with your representatives. Go small business. Thank you.
Well, thank you to all our state reps for being here. Thank you to all of you here, and to those of you, I'm sorry I didn't get to all your questions. I think we had a particularly engaged audience as well as panel this morning, so heed the words of your elected officials. Thank you very much.